his fairy tales, what we know is that he enjoyed Today I invite you to turn the pages of old French fairy tales from the 17th century to explore the food and cooking theme which appears a lot at this time in these stories. But first we are going to prepare donkey skin's cake, and for that we need to find in the magical trunk a beautiful corset of bright silver and an equally beautiful petticoat. We are going to follow the recipe found in this beautiful cookbook from the late 90s, La Cuisine des Fées, which has been often copied and imitated these past years but is still unrivaled. It's an adaptation of donkey skin's cake with sugared oranges and almond powder. We are going to try donkey skin cake a little later. It's not really a coincidence that food, dishes, meals, sophisticated dishes, desserts, sweets appear so much in the fairy tales written in France at the end of the 17th century. It's actually the mirror of what happens at Versailles at the time. It's during these years that the art of eating, what will be called later the gastronomie, la gastronomie, will really be founded on the impulse of our King Louis XIV, who was known for his big and spectacular banquets and his numerous dishes on his meal at each dinner, at each supper. And in many aspects, what happens in the fairy tales is what happens at Versailles. There is not always a big difference between what the courtisans at Versailles experience, the food they hide in their pockets, and what we can read in the pages of these fairy tales. Food at this time becomes very sophisticated, very refined, very important, and also thanks to the progress of gardening. And the director of the gardens, the kitchen gardens and the fruit gardens at Versailles is Jean de la Quintigny, who happens to be a very good friend of our fairy tale writer Charles Perrault. Charles Perrault wrote even a foreword for his book, the book Jean de la Quintigny published about the instructions and advices on the art of gardening. And he wrote even a few verses, beautiful verses, to celebrate the beauty of fruits and peaches. And Charles Perrault wrote even some verses about the amazement to see some strawberries ripe at the middle of February, because Jean de La Quintinie made a lot of progress on the way you could make some fruits and vegetables bloom and ripe much earlier than the normal season would allow them to be. So it's pretty interesting to see that at Versailles in the 17th century, if you wanted to, you could eat some strawberry in February thanks to Jean de La Quintinie. And the writers of the end of the 17th century who wrote these beautiful fairy tales, the very first fairy tales, are not very far from this world of Versailles. Actually, Charles Perrault worked 20 years for the court, for the king. He served the king in the building side, construction side of the government, so he had a lot to do. He was a sort of chief project manager of everything. And he approached all this world, so he was not very far from there, and he was also a friend of Jean de La Quintinie, and he even put his friend in his book about all the most famous and most important men of the 17th century, which I have here, and it's quite interesting because he put a gardener next to some sculptors, painters, cardinals, political men, of course. He put a gardener who has the art of growing vegetables and fruits in his book about the most important man of the 17th century in France. And Madame d'Aulnoy also had a salon littéraire. So in her case, we are going to see that food and dishes and sweets and desserts and cakes of all kinds are present in almost all her fairy tales. You can tell that our fairy tale storytellers were actually enjoying food a lot, enjoying cakes and sweets and everything, and it shows in their stories. But she also had a salon littéraire where she invited and welcomed people who wanted to talk and to read and to read their own writings or to talk about the publication in her own home, and she had a lot of other writers coming. We will see that Charles Perrault even paid her a visit. This is for the next video. In this salon littéraire, you always had food to eat, of course. Some salons had better food than others. I don't know what was the quality of the sweets and what was serving Madame d'Aulnoy in her own salon littéraire, but some ladies who were organizing this salon, it was only women and usually women writers who were organizing this salon, which would take place every week or on a regular basis, but some had better food, some a little less good food, it depended, and some were usually only going into salon where you knew you had really nice things to eat. And this salon littéraire, both with words, stories, poetry, and food, and refined and delicate food served, it just showed that the words and the food were connected for a very long time in the French culture. This moment in history was actually very important for that. It was the beginning of the gastronomy, the beginning of the salon littéraire hosted by women, and it had actually an impact over all the other and the upcoming centuries. So it was very important. We are going to see what dishes and food Charles Perrault mentions in his fairy tales. What we know is that he enjoyed eating. He had a family house along with his brothers in the country, a sort of country house outside of Paris at Viry-Châtillon. And we know that in this house, all his brothers and him and his friends were having nice dinners, nice meals, reciting poetry, and always blending poetry, writing with food. And we have some proofs of that. He himself wrote verses all the time, talking about food and inviting friends to come, saying that they will have a really nice chair for them, to eat a nice capon, a nice foals, they had nice chickens, so we know he enjoyed all that. Of course, in Little Red Riding Hood, you have the little pot of butter and a galette, which will be altered and changed in the 19th century by the Grimm brothers, and they will turn it into a piece of cake and a bottle of wine, which was not what Charles Perrault had imagined. He has another fairy tale which is very interesting because he features for the first time some professional cooks, and this fairy tale is Riquet à la Houppe, Ricky of the Tuft. And what is interesting is that Riquet à la houppe was actually inspired by some real characters at Versailles. So it's quite interesting to know that. But it is the first fairy tale where you see some professional cooks who are preparing a meal. At that moment, the ground opened and she saw below what appeared to be a large kitchen full of cooks and scullions and all the train of attendants which the preparation of a great banquet involves. A gang of some 20 or 30 speed turners emerged and took up their positions round a very long table in a path in the wood. They all wore their cook's caps on one side, and with their basting implements in their hands, they kept time together as they worked, to the lilt of a melodious song. The princess was astonished by this spectacle, and asked for whom their work was being done. "For Prince Wiki of the Taft, madam," said the foreman of the gang. "His wedding is tomorrow." In Sleeping Beauty, there is a really nice little detail. In the real long story, not in the Grimm's adaptation and version, the second part of the story, the mother of the prince wants to eat one of Sleeping Beauty's children. She first wants to eat her daughter. "Je veux manger demain à mon dîner la petite Aurore." "Ah, madame," dit le maître d'hôtel. "Je le veux," dit la reine. Et elle le dit d'un ton d'ogresse qui a envie de manger de la chair fraîche. "Et je la veux manger à la sauce Robert." And Robert was a very famous cook in the 17th century who invented a sauce both with white wine and onions. And it's just something a little funny that in this tragic and horrible moment when the ogress wants to eat a child, a poor little child, is going to mention that she would like to have this very trendy sauce with it, which was very trendy at the time in the 17th century. So it's just a little sign of his sense of humor here to just make it less dramatic. In Cinderella, there are oranges and lemons that the prince gives to Cinderella's sisters, and in Donkey Skin, of course, we have the magical cake, this very important cake which is going to reveal the identity of Donkey Skin, who is a princess, and she has hidden a ring, her own ring, inside the cake. This way the prince will know that she is not only beautiful because he has seen her already, but on top of that she is a real princess. And what is interesting is that in the first version he wrote in verses in 1694, which was beautiful too. It's just maybe less spectacular, and we are a little less used to verses now, but once you get used to it, it's really nice. Pourquoi faut-il s'émerveiller que la raison la mieux sensée lasse souvent de trop veiller, par des contes d'ogres et de fées ingénieusement bercés, prennent plaisir à sommeiller? Sans craindre donc qu'on me condamne, de mal employer mon loisir, je vais, pour contenter votre juste désir, vous raconter au long l'histoire de Podane. And she bakes a galette in the original version, not a cake, which is interesting. He also mentions no sugar in the different list of ingredients. There is no sugar appearing, so maybe it was more a sort of bread with a... Maybe it was more sort of brioche, we don't really know, or a galette. In that case it would be more like a nice bread, sort of a little sophisticated bread. So this cake comes from the recipe book I showed you. So we are going to try a slice. It's the first time I do it. It has some orange, sugared orange little pieces inside, but it's very simple, very easy. A little more sophisticated than Donkey Skin cake, but still very simple and really easy to do for beginners like me. So we are going to try the cake. I quite like it. It's a sponge cake, a sort of sponge cake, but not too dry because you have 4 eggs and 3 white eggs, which make it really, really nice, really tasty. The oranges are nice. It's not too greasy too. There is just a tiny bit of butter. Yes, it's really a sweet cake. I recommend it. It's simple and it's perfect for tea time, for the afternoon tea. Not really as a dessert, I would say, but it's really nice for tea time. Charles Perrault is not the only one who mentions, as I said, food and dishes and sweets in his fairy tales. We are going to see Madame Daunois talks about food all the time, but also le Comte de Caylus, which is who is a writer who will arrive a little later, just really early 18, and he also mentions quite a bit of food.
In Tourloup et Rirette, le Comte de Caylus writes: La fée des prés aimait à plaire et à obliger, elle avait donc toujours soin de leur faire trouver tantôt les meilleurs petits gâteaux du monde, tantôt des confitures et très communément des dragées, le tout pour leur collation. In L'Enchantement impossible, The Impossible Enchantment, le Comte de Caylus writes: Une autre pièce ne présentait à la vue que toutes sortes de confitures sèches et liquides, que des dragées et toutes les pâtisseries imaginables qui devaient toujours demeurer chaudes comme à la sortie du four.
So in Madame Daunois stories, there are countless descriptions of banquets, food dishes, collation, goûter, pretty much all of her stories, so it would take 3 hours to mention all these moments. In the Ram, you have seen my Ram in previous videos. The Ram is a really sweet fairy tale, and there was a moment where some food is falling from the sky and it's raining sausages, and it's just her crazy imagination, which is very often related to food, which created this scene, which is really nice. And something she does, which I really like, she often mentions shops, which were popular at the time, butchers, patisserie or bakers, and we can easily know where they were located, so it's really pleasant to discover in her fairy tale.
In The King Ram, Madame Daunois writes: Cette plaine était couverte d'arbres singuliers, il y avait des avenues tout entières de perdreaux mieux piqués et mieux cuits que chez la Guerbois. In La Princesse Printanière, she writes: Prends courage, lui dit l'amoureux rossignol, tu y trouveras des dragées et des tartelettes de chez Lecoq.
And we know that Lecoq was located rue de l'Université in the Saint-Germain neighborhood. So it's just nice you could wander in the streets of Paris. You can still see the ghost of these shops today, which were once there in the 17th century and were really popular. One of my favorite scenes featuring food in Madame Daunois' fairy tales is the bluebird and the scene with Florine, the main character, who has just broken an egg, and inside the egg she discovered some pâté parlant, a speaking pâté. We are going to see if the pâté I just bought at my local butcher is a speaking pâté or a singing pâté, just like in the bluebird. That's all I have to share today about food and fairy tales. I hope it is going both to inspire you to read more of these fairy tales and maybe to do some recipes inspired by these fairy tales, whether from the book I mentioned or maybe you can do your own adaptations. And if you want, you can write them down and keep them in your recipe notepad, which is part of my new printable collection inspired by Spring and Cook in all French fairy tales. So when you buy the collection, you have the pages, you just have to cut them, and you have the cover, and you have several pages, and you just have afterwards to use a pen and write down your recipe. And you have 3 different examples that you can have in your notepad. So this is for your fairy tale recipes, in case you needed a little solution to organize all your recipes instead of having them in a horrible iPad, iPhone, or I don't know, something in paper that you can have access without electricity or battery is really nice, and it's also decorative. You can learn more about it and see a very detailed video I've done on my website merveillesenpapier.com/printable stationery. You have the link just under the video, and you will find everything which is included in this collection. You have mainly printable files that you have to print yourself, so you have some recipe pads, you have other pads inspired by Donkey Skin, of course, she's a bit the star here. There is some small ones, some big ones, some inspired by the ram also, another one with Blue Cat, Chableu, who is another of my favorite fairy tale character from Madame Dannois' fairy tales, and many other things. You will have all the details on my website, and you will see more if you are interested in that. And you also receive 2 cards which will be sent to you. So the cards come in an envelope, and the rest you will receive it instantly when you get your collection. And I wanted to thank those who already got their collections, and please show me your photos if you are writing some papers, if you are printing the notepad, organizing your recipe, if you are printing the illustrations and decorating your walls with it. You have quite many things included. I would love to see how it looks like in your home, so feel free to email me to send me your photos. I would love to see it. Also wanted to say that the Marie-Antoinette workshop has already been open for quite a few weeks. It's going to remain open till May 20, so you have a few more weeks to join if you are interested in creating a Marie-Antoinette and her wardrobe, her outfit and accessories. I will have a video about Marie-Antoinette also coming very soon. I'm catching up with my videos because I was a little late and very busy in April working on my stationery, but I will be back also with a Marie-Antoinette video in May. You have the link under the video if you would like to join the Marie-Antoinette workshop, and this one is on my workshop website learnthemagicofpaper.com. Thank you very much for joining me today. I will be back very soon, and I'm catching up with all my videos. The next one we are going to revisit and to explore all Charles Perrault's life. This video was promised for a long time, and I'm going to have it ready in a few days.